Less than 2 weeks to the NFL trade deadline, and the Saints have to decide if they're gonna buy or sell, and pretty much, I think it boils down to 3 questions they need to answer. Also, due to the Alvin Kamara extension, yesterday, the very end of this video, I do have some thoughts about that. So, I'm Tim, and let's talk Saints. And the first one, quite frankly, is do the Saints have a realistic chance to win the NFC South? A lot's been made of we have a pretty much an easier schedule, especially a stretch coming up over the next few weeks. Um, at the same time, looks like maybe we're getting some key players back and getting healthy, but we don't know for sure yet. I'm like, well, what is the rest of the NFC South doing along those weeks? Because if you look at the standings right now, Falcons and Bucks are both 4-3. Saints are 2-5, so we're two games down on both of them. We have losses to both of them. The Falcons are actually 3-0 in division. Um, Tampa's 1-1. Panthers are 0-2, which means Tampa gets to play the Panthers twice. And we're sitting there with our one and only win over the Panthers. It's not the greatest starting point you want. Sitting with 11 games left to go. But there you are. I should say 10 games left to go. Even worse. So just started looking at the rest of the schedule for all the teams, and well, the Falcons are sitting there uh, in control of the division right now. Their remaining schedules combined record is 29-36 at a 44% winning percentage. The Bucks' remaining schedule, those teams have a combined 27-40 for a 40% winning percentage. Our remaining 34-39. 48%. Panthers 36-31. So, which is over 54%. It's not like the teams we're chasing have a monster schedule coming down the stretch by any thought. And they're playing each other this week. So we'll get to San Diego in depth at the end of the week. But for right now, just saying, all of a sudden San Diego becomes that much more critical because we at least have a chance to make up ground on one of them. Look, and the trajectory of all this could change. Injuries, let's just talk about that. Again, we're supposed to be getting some guys back healthy, especially on the offensive side. Maybe that picks us up a little bit. Maybe that gives us a better edge coming down that stretch on that. Not exactly as easy as we thought schedule, especially compared to who we're chasing. And one of the teams we're chasing may have just caught. Tampa Bay's been dealing with some injuries themselves quietly, and we're getting guys back, especially some prior to when they played us and right after. But they got devastated on Monday night, not only by the Ravens on the scoreboard, by the Ravens physically, but by the injury bug that all of a sudden has jumped on them. They lost their top two receivers. They lost a couple of their defensive backs, and that's just off the top of my head. I don't know how their final injury report came out, but they were physically getting manhandled most of that game after the first 10 minutes or so. You never wish anything bad upon anyone, especially when it comes to injuries. And if you saw the Godwin play, dear Lord, you never want to see that on a football field. But so that's not what I'm saying here. But the reality is it does exist. It hit us. It can hit any team at any time. But you still got a lot of ground to make up. Not exactly the best of the three. Any clear cut. I mean, we've necessarily got a quote unquote easy path due to schedule compared to any of the other ones. And look, any type of major issues of all types could hit any of those other three teams and not hit us, the bad luck bug. If it doesn't, if things just kind of keep playing out more or less like they have the first third of the season, because that's about the point where we are now, going into week 8, a little over. I would say not much of a chance, if a downright no, on coming back to win the division. And even if you don't win the division, well, you might want to ask, well, hey, can we still win enough games to make the wild card? I guess technically yes, although that's probably going to be a much harder road to walk down because um, 16 teams in the NFC, basically overall in the playoff listing, we're 14th. So that's a lot of ground to make up there too. And if you can't win enough games to win a division, I find it hard to believe you're going to be able to win enough games to make a wild card spot on this. So, first question you ask, can we to win a division? Unless some really insanely crazy stuff happens, um, odds are no, we're not. Like next question, uh, pretty much self-explanatory. Can they get better in their run offense, and can they get better in their run defense? Um, and it seems like a platitude out there where everybody goes, oh, you have to be able to run, and you have to be able to stop the run to win games. At the same time, a lot of those same people that say that are saying, yeah, but you got to have an awesome quarterback and a passing offense because it's a quarterback league, it's a passing league, which fundamentally used to be true from roughly starting around 2006, 2007 up until about 2020. And the stats, the numbers, the analytics, everything's out there. It's since Todd Bowles figured out a way to ground Patrick Mahomes in that Super Bowl when Tampa Bay won. The trend, the copycatness of the league, and the trend has been using more and more of those style of defenses where the passing numbers have been coming down. And after a couple of years of offense trying to butt their heads through a brick wall, they finally are looks like getting smart and going, well, if they're going to defend the pass that hard, especially the deep shots, doesn't that open up some spots to run the ball? And you've seen an improve in the running game. Just this year, the correlation through 7 weeks, because went back and figured it out that if you have a top 10 rushing offense, those top 10's combined record is 45 and 22. They're combined 68% winning percentage. You're in the bottom 10, which the Saints aren't quite there yet, but they're headed that way after the last 2 weeks. They're not that far out of it. It's 17 and 46 for a 27% winning percentage. Rushing defense, again, Saints are kind of in that territory, and I think they're actually solid in the bottom 10 now. But if you're in the top 10, you're winning at a combined wins loss 40 and 24. That's a combined 63% winning percentage. Bottom 10, 27, 41, 40% winning percentage. Look, and this isn't a direct correlation, analytical, end all be all. This is just kind of pointing out, look, you can run it, you can stop the run. Yeah, the old saying is kind of true. You greatly improve your chances to win. And we've been very bad after being very good at it the first couple of weeks. Started trending and has not stopped going the wrong way for both when we're trying to run the ball and, Lord forbid, when we try to stop somebody. And this goes back again to what we just talked about. You're playing San Diego this week. You have the two teams you're chasing playing each other. You really have to win this game. You're on a 5-game losing streak. You can't afford to go to 6. And if you win out on the West Coast, and I think I just said San Diego, I'm in LA, you can pick up a game at least on one of the two teams you're chasing. And every little bit's going to help right now. But the quick dive I've got on San Diego so far, again, we'll have more at the end of the week. It's almost like we're facing the Broncos again, who just, we're still smarting from what they did to us a little less than a week ago. This is very similar. They have a really good defense. They have a really good run defense. Offense is fair to middling. nothing really exciting there going on, except they got this guy named J.K. Dobbins that when he's healthy, is a pretty good running back. A lot like Denver's Javonte Williams. And if they have a coach that decides that, hey, look, we're just going to keep feeding that ball and running you in there until they stop it. Their coach is Jim Harbaugh, who's been known to do just that and win championships with that style of football. Sneaky suspicion you've got Denver all over again. So it's almost just the short-term test because in the greater scheme of things, to keep winning the rest of the year, if this trend holds true, which I think it will, after you deal with Dobbins and the Chargers, start thinking about some of those teams on the back end of our schedule. Cleveland looks like they're getting a healthy Nick Chubb back. You got them. You still have to deal with Atlanta and Tampa Bay one more time each. We just 2 weeks ago saw what Tampa Bay did to us with the running game. Carolina in 2 weeks. Same thing with Chuba Hubbard. They may just decide, hey, we're going to bash him in there 20, 30 times, see what happens. So you better be able to stop them. Let's not forget later on in the schedule, Rams was sitting at a 2-5 team right now with some guy named Kyren Williams, who's one of the best running backs in the league, and he's tearing everybody up right now. Oh, yeah, and Washington later on. Jane Daniels is definitely going to be a problem in that game if he's healthy and ready to go. And don't forget about Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler, and even Jeremy McNichols the last couple of weeks with Robinson being kind of banged up has showed up and been able to run the ball. So this is more than a short-term problem that you have to beat San Diego, and it looks like they're going to be bringing a run defense and a running game. You start getting further down in your schedule, you're going to have the same problems over and over again. And if it looks anything like it's like the last 2 weeks, well, answer this question is no. You can't run the ball. You can't stop the run. And direct correlation almost is showing you that you just are seriously decreasing your chances to win below 50% in both categories. Oh, yeah. The third question, the $10 million question, is the cap flexibility. Can you be a buyer or can you be a seller? This one is simple yet complicated to kind of go through. Really, the complicated part first. And it's complicated enough that I almost didn't want to do this video because you can't do it without dealing with this part of it. But I mean, basically, the complication is the fact that when you're talking about making trades in the NFL, this isn't fantasy football trades. This, whether you're acquiring a player or moving on from one, and by moving on, whether you're going to trade him, cut him, or he retires or whatever, there's lasting ramifications to your salary cap over a certain period of time that's going to hit you. So in other words, like the Saints like to do is do the prorated signing bonus where they give cash up front, and then to make room in the current cap space, they borrow against future cap space. So that $10 million signing bonus for a 5-year deal suddenly becomes, instead of all 10 million up front when you hand them the check, 2 million for each of the 5 years. But if that player leaves, that dead money, if you've got 8 million left to go because after the first year you have to cut him or he retires or whatever, bam, the whole thing's hitting you right then and there. That's what makes this tough, because if you're selling, you have to take that into consideration. If somebody comes knocking on your door and want one of your players, and then you look on the back end of that contract, because especially in the case of our older players that we overpaid and underperforming their contract, a lot of that contract's been paid up front, and the team coming in isn't assuming the dead money. And here's where it really gets complicated: is all the mechanisms that the Saints use to make that structure happen. And it is one of the things they do is in restructures is convert potential bonus money into current salary, kind of doing the same thing, where they write him a big check up front, prorate it out through the or spread it out through the remainder of the 4 or 5 years plus any void years they might add to it. And the base salary is next to nothing. It's minimum in some cases. Or for a player who's at a position that's the going rate's 10 million a year in salary, well, they've kind of done all that with the crazy bonus stuff, and they're actually only paying him 2 million a year in salary. So when somebody comes to knock in the trade, the dead money and all the bonuses, you've already wrote the check for, and you have to account for it. Meanwhile, they're coming in and going, oh yeah, well, we don't have to worry about any of that stuff. All it is game checks for the next 2 years. Easy peasy. It's not that much. So that's a tradable commodity somebody may want, but you may not want to part with, even if he's not as productive as you want him to be, because you can't handle when all that dead money hits the second he leaves the building to join his new team. If it was just one contract, independent of each other, not that hard to figure out. But the reason why the Saints do stuff like that, one of the reasons why we're constantly tens, if not hundreds of $1 million over the salary cap, is the way it's interwoven contract between contracts. So the 50 million you're giving player A, you need some kind of way to find a hole in player B's contract. So you restructure and you get that 50 million, write him a check, call it a bonus, give him a 10-year deal, spread 5 million per year out. Oh, the math works. Sooner or later, it kind of catches up to you. The point being in all this is you've got to do a lot of work. I am not that guy. I think most people on the planet who are capable of looking at, and it's not just the 53-man roster, when you're considering the cap space and ramifications, some of the other, everybody in your organization that's a player, practice squad, guys in IR, pups, everything else, all have rules attached to how the money's handled. They all have contracts. There's all quite a, even the lowest paid guy is still making a lot of money. It's the NFL after all. And that's not counting any dead money in the current year you carried over from players that you moved on from in previous year. So I can't figure this out. Like you said, there's only a few people in the world that can, and almost all of them work for NFL organizations. So it's up to the Saints. They have to figure it out. Can we sell? Now, I'm kind of ignoring the buying part because, honestly, the first two questions that we just asked, if those answers are hard, they're going, man, we need so much to happen to be able to catch somebody in the division, much less catch a wild card. Or we need so many pieces to bring in to be able to run the ball or stop the run or a combination of both that we need to make sure we can even beat the 1-5 and 2-4 teams and whoever else is remaining on our schedule that should be wins. But if they run it on us and we can't run it on them, they're more than likely, high percentage wise, going to be losses. Then why would you even consider to buy at that point? If you can buy one or two players that actually help solve that problem, plus what you should be getting back off the injured list, then maybe. But then you're running down the risk of, well, now we're making that future cap situation even worse. The reason why that's dangerous, because if you go that route of buying and it doesn't work, and you've created those more cap issues for you starting in 2025, going to however long it took to spread the money around to make it work. That's that much longer that if this ultimately, and honestly, it's heading in the direction that it will require a huge reset, a rebuild, you're looking at multiple years. You're not looking at, some teams have managed to do it in 1, 2 to 3 is kind of the norm if they can pull it off. But if you screw up too much of this stuff, and the cap would be one of the huge ones you screw up, now you're spreading that thing out to 4 or 5 years. You might be able to sell the rebuild on the Saints fan. I mean, seriously, you start with, it'll take us 2 years, and you're hoping it won't take any more than 3. But right now, I don't even think you can sell that to Saints fans. It's been a little too much lying and gaslighting going on the last couple of years for us to even buy into it. So this is careful ground to tread on. And they have to get this part right to even consider being a buyer or a seller. Because whatever which way you go, if it doesn't work, like I said, it's one of those because of the cap situation we're in. And I think right now it's about 75 mil over projected in 2025. Over 75 million under projected in 2025. All bets are off because now you have more than enough wiggle room if something doesn't work to have a chance to fix it. But when you're scrambling like we're scrambling every year, your options are so narrow, just basically based on the money to start with. You have almost no room to operate. And so when things start going sideways, you're not finding the next lane in the shoulder to keep from hitting stuff. You're banging off the rails. So you're looking real hard on it's basically three fundamental questions. Can you catch everybody in your division and win it? Not likely. Can you catch any of the rest of the NFC to make it as a wild card? Almost impossible. Can you do the fundamental stuff that in order to accomplish either one of those goals, run the ball, stop the other team from running when you start facing some teams down there whose records are as bad or worse than yours? Can you do it? Maybe. So then what does the rest of the season look like? What does potentially the start of next season look like? Can we alter the course by being buyers for this season? Or do we get the head start being a seller on doing whatever it is we have to do to start over next season? It's all tough questions. But look, somebody in the Saints organization has to start figuring this out. Um, we just can't keep banking our season on hopes and magic pixie dust and whatever else it is they're coming up with, trying to turn things around. Because every time you get a glimpse of what could be, and this even goes into sometimes last year and the year before, much like the first two games of this season, you're right there. You feel like you're right there, but then all of a sudden the course changes and there's no turnaround, and it's like you're done. And even if you make things look good coming down the stretch, like we did more or less the last 2 years, the reality is you haven't changed your position any. You're right back where you started the season, which seems to be the exact same starting point we've had 3 years in a row. So I can't honestly answer should they be buyers or sellers, because this is, I think, the breaking point of the organization where internally somebody has to step in and say two very important things. One, what we've been trying to do ain't freaking working no more. Stop or you're going. Two, give me the plan that's going to work and how long it's going to take you and how you're going to go about and do it, so I can reasonably measure if you are capable, if the plan's going to work after a couple seasons. Because if I got to cut bait and start over, I need to know before the end of the experiment. And my question is, do we have anybody in the organization actually capable of walking in and telling Loomis on down exactly those two things? My take on buyers or sellers, and the simple fact that I can't answer this question. I don't know if any Saints fans can. Wrap it up with, and it kind of segues into this a little bit. Alvin got his deal yesterday. Thank God. I don't know what took so long. And I'm a little bittersweet about it. Hear me out. I'm going to explain why. I love Alvin. I definitely didn't want Alvin going anywhere. I wanted Alvin to ride out his career, into the sunset with the Saints. Um, And I felt like he had a lot left in the tank, and I think he's proven this year he does, and even when injured, he can normally give you something. Hopefully, we get him back healthy along with everybody else, and we can see the Alvin of the first few games. That's the sweet part. The bitter part is I'm so inclined um, to believe what I call the big three: Alvin, Cam, and Demario, who I think should all wind up in the Hall of Fame one day. Whether it actually happens, I don't know. May end their careers without playing in a Super Bowl just because we couldn't get them there. And so there was just that part of me that was like, you know, if Alvin pulls a Ricky Jackson, either whether somebody just would have come trade deadline if he still didn't have his deal and, you know, they worked it out to where he was going to move on to have a shot at a Super Bowl. You know, I'm thinking sort of Ricky Jackson is who was in the same boat, was going to be in a Hall of Fame. And, you know, I hate the fact that it had to be freaking Frisco, but he had to jump shits to go get his ring. So that's the bitter part that I less turnarounds made, less the right decisions are made, and the course is corrected and done soon. Alvin joins a group of to make it three all-time Saint great who should have played in a Super Bowl at this point in their career, hasn't done it, and I'm just not sure it's going to happen. That's all I got. Catch you up rest of the week. We're going to have this Chargers breakdown Friday night, Saturday morning. Not really sure how that's going to work out, but it'll be in that time frame. We'll have the post game Sunday night, of course. So make sure you subscribe if you're new here. Um, the like, the share. Please definitely give me a thumbs up if you think we should be buyers, and then drop it in the comments if you think we should be sellers. We'll handle it that way. And make sure you hit the notification so when I post up everything on there when we're going live on Sunday, you'll have all the info and can join along. Hopefully it'll be a Saints win. But till then, I'm Tim. Peace out. Who dat?